quite boring, so not doing anything. So 3 maybe longer years ago, I did my final study for my master's on women, premenopausal women, no older than 55, and there was 40 participants in my study, and we were looking at iron deficiency related to the types of foods people consume and in what combination, and whether that would affect fatigue levels, because the most common symptom of menopause is fatigue, which can be due to many things. So we started looking at, okay, let's forget the menopause age range, although all of this will be relevant. And rather than always drugs being the #1 solution for any symptom of any type that we have, could we have a look at a specific dietary intervention which would improve the feelings of fatigue? So the first thing to note is that 2/3 of the women in the world are either iron deficient or anemic. 2/3. So that was quite surprising when I started to look into it. And obviously, if you are even just a little bit iron deficient, that is going to have an effect on feelings of fatigue, because your hemoglobin levels will be lower. The issue that you have when you go to the doctor, 2 things. One is that they will ask questions about your lifestyle in terms of, you know, do you sleep well and how are your stress levels potentially. But it's not often just down to whether you're sleeping well or not. Both will have an effect on one another. So if you are a little bit iron deficient, that will affect your sleep. And some people have really, really bad issues with sleep because of restless leg syndrome. And we already know that an iron diffusion, which would be like an intravenous blast, if you like, of iron, can help restless leg syndrome. And the other thing is with doctors is that usually they'll prescribe an iron tablet, which might help in the short term. It's like putting a plaster over a wound. It's not going to pinpoint the issue with your iron levels, and it certainly doesn't look at all of the measures that you would need to know. It's not just as simple as increasing iron. So you may have an issue with storing iron, you may have an issue with absorbing iron, you may have an issue with transporting iron to where it needs to be. It's not just have a blood test and look at your red blood cell count, for example. And that might not show the issue. And like I said, iron is very complicated. So you could be having a very, very good diet with lots of iron-rich foods, but that iron is not then getting to where it needs to go because it's not being absorbed or it's not being transported. So there are 4 tests really that cover all bases, which would be hemoglobin, red blood cell count, ferritin, which is your storage, and transferrin, which is your transport system. So all of this is on the document that I will send to Katie, so you can have a look at it. And if you ask the doctor for those tests, they typically won't do them as standard procedure. So you would have to probably score in a very, very poor way on your red blood cell count, for example, to then be referred to a specialist who would then look at all of these measures. And as we know, getting to the specialist can be tricky. You have to be quite pushy to get to the specialist in the first instance. So it's always useful to have a look at the diet of an individual, do a 3-day dietary assessment, usually 2 days in the week and 1 day at the weekend, or vice versa, just to get a good picture. And then have a look at the types of food people are eating, but also if they are consuming those foods with tannins, which would stop the absorption of iron. I'll talk about tannins in a moment. And also if they're consuming those foods with iron enhancers, which will increase the absorption of iron. So there's 3 things we can look at. What foods can you eat that are iron rich? And I have a list of all of those foods and the quantities. What foods should you avoid with a 2-hour window before and after your meals? And what foods you should include to help the absorption? Okay. So my dietary intervention lasted for 6 weeks, and we did 2 types of measure. We measured with blood because it's a science degree, and we also anecdotally asked people to report back on a certain scale on how they were feeling, which is a psychology measure. And every day people would report back on a particular questionnaire, which was actually through Google Forms, so it was really easy to complete, and it was just like tick, 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 and everybody had their own individual files, if you like, so that we could measure and see if people were increasing their energy levels and decreasing feelings of fatigue. So it was a great study, and the vast majority of participants changed their fatigue levels positively. So my hypothesis was that if people first targeted diet, then they potentially would increase iron levels over the 4 different measures and decrease their feelings of fatigue, which they did. So if we have a look, let me just, okay, I'll share this with you, but I have a nice document which I will find here. Just bear with me. Just give me a sec because everything is going super slow. Iron information sheet. Here we go. Can you actually see me as I'm skipping through this document? Can people still see me?
Yes.
No, you can see me now. See me
I
now.
can see you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Okay. Oh. Okay, I don't know why, but my documents aren't opening. It keeps saying it's working on it. But the first thing to consider is that there's 2 different types of iron in foods. And one is called HEM, or heme, depending on your pronunciation, and the other is non-hem or non-heme. So heme is from animal products. It's much richer in iron, and the non-heme is from plant-based foods. So for vegetarians, it's possible, and vegans, to get iron. It's not as rich, and so for somebody who would be iron deficient or anemic, they would have to really consider having a good varied diet and getting lots of different types of plant-based, non-heme iron kind of additions into the diet. So you can have a list of those. Obviously, up at the top of the list, as you can imagine, there's some really rough things like liver, any type of liver, or any part of the animal, let's say, but liver in particular is really, really rich. And even our dogs, usually about once a week, if not every other week, we give them liver, because they do have a similar digestive system to us, and they need the same things, and they run around like lunatics. So we do give them that, but it's not something I personally eat or enjoy, but I know some people do. The vegetable ones are a little bit more difficult, and I'll let people have a look at the sheets, but for some bizarre reason, it doesn't want to open. I think maybe because I'm on Zoom and it's taking up a lot of time. Combine iron rich foods alongside your hem, and that would further increase the amount of iron that you're having. And it would be quite difficult to overdo it, and so you wouldn't overdo some iron, particularly because menstruation lose iron every month in a cycle. So foods, and when you're eating your iron-rich foods, tea and coffee are amongst those, particularly coffee with caffeine, and alcohol. So most people like to have a cup of coffee, like to have a breakfast, and it is an opportunity to get starting with your breakfast. So something like eggs would be great. And what I would do is just time when you're consuming these things. So it's not that you can't have coffee, but let's say you're up at a certain time, 7 a.m. wouldn't be the advice to have something which is potentially quite harsh on your digestive system. But if you want your coffee, have it at 7 a.m. and then you wait and you have your breakfast at 9 a.m. and then you have another coffee again mid-morning at 11 a.m. So that's a solution. And people will say, oh, I can't do that, I have to. Well, if you're feeling fatigued and you want to try and improve your energy levels and how you're feeling, this is a very easy way to do that. And it's not that you can't have it, it's just considering the timing, okay? Ascorbic acid is something that we find in citrus fruits, and that we know increases the absorption of iron. So having orange juice or grapefruit juice, for example, with your breakfast will help that absorption. So again, you just time these things in to help with that absorption. There are some plant-based foods other than citrus fruits that can also increase the absorption. So this will all come through on the sheet. But with any intervention, when you try this, you have to be consistent. So it's just about thinking, right, what one or two things can I try? Is it changing the types of foods that I'm consuming, and maybe at one of my meals per day, I'm going to make a real effort to make that an iron-rich meal. Is it timing my coffee? Is it adding now some citrus fruit, for example, to my meals? Which thing do I really want to look at? Because doing too much is just going to be maybe a bit overwhelming and not sustainable. So I would suggest having a look currently at the things that you're eating on a regular basis. And because we are a little bit boring, we tend to just repeat the same types of meals that we have. And like I say, just altering one meal a day to make sure that you're consuming more iron will make a big, big difference. Okay, so I have a client at the moment, and the goal that we set between us has nothing to do with weight. It's all about reducing feelings of fatigue. And I have a particular way of measuring daily, which then is sent through every week back to the client in chart form to show where her energy levels have been tracked daily. So that's something as well, if you're interested, you can have a chat to me about, because if you don't use any measures and you're just thinking back to, well, did I feel tired last week or not? I'm not really sure. Was I struggling? Was my motivation lower? Did I feel like I could just sleep at any time? Whatever it might be, if you're just guessing how you were last week and trying to compare that in some way to how you were previously or how you feel today, it's quite impossible. So measuring something or just jotting something down, recording how you're feeling, it's a 10-second activity, but it can make all the difference. Because if on a particular day, or if that extends through to a week or a couple of weeks, you start feeling better, then we need to make sure we know what different things you were doing in that particular week. Now, if you have very young children or pets that jump all over you in the night, or if you're living in a country where it's 40 degrees at night and you're struggling to sleep, then those things would need to be considered, because some external factors, sleep disturbance through the night for whatever reason, is going to make a difference, obviously, to how you feel throughout the day. But still, by trying to improve your diet in that one area so that we know we're getting the right amount of iron in, is going to be positive, because either you will feel better, or if you're doing all the right things and you're still feeling exactly the same, high levels of fatigue, low energy, etc., then that's evidence then to go back to your GP to say, well, I've been following this intervention, for X amount of weeks and I'm not noticing a difference, and now I'd like to push to see a specialist. Word to the wise, iron tablets will stop your absorption of iron from any food for 48 hours. So on one hand, the iron tablet will give you additional iron, but it also stops the absorption naturally from any foods you're eating. So it isn't really a solution. And we know that the tablet also gives some people some quite nasty side effects. What I do know from researching this is that iron infusions, which are intravenous, are highly successful. So they do offer this as a solution within the NHS. Obviously, you'd have to see a specialist. You will have had to have all your blood measures done. But what we know is for people that are struggling to absorb or store iron, an intravenous blast will be going in through the bloodstream, in and around the body. And all of the reports and the research that I've read have suggested that people just feel incredible afterwards. So right before lockdown, I found a private company in London who do the intravenous method, and I showed them some of my blood measures and was going to go down, just really to trial it and see how it made me feel. And so I knew the procedure. So, you know, and also, was this a good organisation I could refer some of my clients to if necessary? And then we went into lockdown. So it's probably something, as soon as things get back going again, that I'm going to do personally, and then I can report back to how I found it. But I am not a doctor, so in the first instance, if you are really struggling and you think you might be deficient, then you need to see your GP. I know me, as a child, I was iron deficient, and sometimes I go through waves, even when I'm doing the right things in terms of. So I'm going to see if I can open this now. Aha! Now it wants to open. That's good. No, it doesn't. Opening like some Google sheet that I'm not asking for anyway. Right, I can get that to people anyway. Right. Okay, so are there any questions about iron that people have? Has anybody got any questions? No?
No, I think you've covered everything pretty much at the minute.
Yeah, I'm just annoyed that I can't get my sheets up. We've lost Jenny as well. Don't know where she's gone. But yeah, this is a topic that I looked at extensively for like 3 months. Basically, lived in the world of iron while I was doing this intervention, and researching why I should be doing it, and you know, what were my participants going through. So yeah, I have lots of information and stats and stuff if you wanted to know any more. But yeah, what I'll say, because other people do watch this afterwards, if people want to message me like through the Facebook group or through Messenger, then I can send like the review that I did and looked at. It's really dull because obviously it's written in university speak. It's not really in layman's terms. Maybe I could simplify it when I've got time at some point. So it's quite boring. But the dietary information sheet, which I think is just a couple of pages long, it just lists the foods to have and in what quantities, the heme foods, non-heme foods, and what to have in terms of absorption to increase absorption and what to avoid. So avoiding the tannins that will stop the absorption. So yeah, I have all of that. I'm interested in. I think the zoom's on, it doesn't want to let me open that at the moment. So yeah.
Okay, cool.
Well, it's a different time, and Katie's not here. She might usually have some questions, but I'll just leave that there with everybody, and if you want to get in touch and ask me any more, then feel free.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much.
That's okay. Enjoy the rest of your day, Alex.
Yes, thank you, and you.
I will. I've got this rubbish meeting thing now.
Oh yes.
I'm going to get off and like prepare properly for it. So,
well,
yeah.
good luck.
Okay.
See you later.
See you.
Bye. Bye. Yes, we can do so.